I am going to get a copyright takedown notice if I continue to sing that particular song, which was such a hit back in the 80s and continues on to be a delightful hit these days. Ladies and gentlemen, hello, welcome to Disorganized Play. I am your silken-throated host, Tom Lommel, the DJ, the DM, the man, the myth, the legend himself. Welcome to my show. Welcome to my cornucopia of Dungeon Master advice and just general life coaching. Soak it in. I don't know what this character is lately that I've been doing, but you are going to have to put up with it. Hi, everyone. It's me, Tom Lommel. I am Tom Lommel, the Dungeon Bastard. I am here to share with you my insights, my revelations, my experiences, my advice, my opinion, and my memory of how things went last night, fuzzy though it may be. So, welcome to Disorganized Play. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the format, I run an actual play D&D game on Wednesday nights here on Saving Throw Show. We are currently playing through the Sunless Citadel. We are, as you can see, we just finished session 6. The players just turned 3rd level, like just as in the end of the session last night. On Tuesdays, I sit down with you for roughly an hour and talk about the challenges, the changes that I anticipate I'll need to make for that week's installment of Epic D&D Adventure. And then on Thursdays, I come back and tell you how I didn't use most of it that I prepared. That's the story this week. Some stories I used everything perfectly, and we still had kind of a weird session. Sometimes I wasn't very well prepared at all, and we had an absolutely kick-ass section. Don't draw any conclusions from that, okay? I advise being prepared. I have to say, my car rides to the studio are a lot more peaceful when I feel fully prepared for what's going to happen in that session than when I'm just sitting there just like, who are they going to talk to? So, think about that. That's my personal experience with DM preparedness. And I will tell you, I have had more of those anxiety-ridden car rides to my game table than I have had the peaceful, hey, you know what? Just stop and get a burger while we're on our way. Why not? So, keep that in mind. I often preach. I don't often follow my own advice. I try to. But sometimes it's just learn from what I say and not from what I do. All right, nobody's perfect. That's why we're all here. Today on the agenda, we're going to talk about following. See, my camera's just off slightly. I have to do some. I might have to get a second tripod since the current configuration that I have, it's a little bouncy, guys. Can't gesture as much as I like. All right. So today's topics: following the party. Interesting. Compressing encounters. You will have noticed that, perhaps, last night. And finally, Schrodinger's clues to the rescue! Ha ha! My mad genius pays off, finally. And then finally, we'll do some Q&A. How about that? How does that sound? Or to round out the hour. Sorry that we had to move the schedule up. I have an audition today. I'm an important Hollywood kind of guy. None of us believe that. All right. So, without any further ado, let's... I don't want to recap the session too much. You can go back and watch it on the VOD. I will just, like, as by way of introduction, say I felt like it was a fun, successful session. Even though the session was largely combat. Now, if you go back 2 weeks, you will find a session that was entirely combat, which I didn't feel was particularly successful. But this session felt like everybody had fun, everybody was pretty engaged, everybody was getting out of it what they wanted to get out of it. and I didn't feel like it really bogged down too much. So I thought it was a solid session. I thought it was actually some classic dungeoneering, you know, go into an area, do some exploring, get attacked, defeat the foes, you know, spring some traps, discover some treasure, learn about some clues, gain some insight into what's going on, have some fun moments of role playing between the party members and whatnot. So I thought all around it was a well balanced session of Dungeons and Dragons. If you want to look at the pillars of exploration and interaction and combat. I refer to those so many times, and I'm beginning to wonder if that is in fact all there is to Dungeons and Dragons. But it feels like it's shorthand right now for, you know, until I come up with a better fourth concept. We'll stick with those three pillars. I'll put some thought into that. Maybe there is something else. All right. So yes, I thought it was a very good session. Yeah, Havana was very excited to finally make it to the Rat Warrens and encounter the legendary Fountain of Death. Weird that the Fountain of Death spewed poison gas that sickened and hurt half the party when they tripped it off. That is strange indeed. But I guess they called it the Fountain of Death because it's trying to kill you. So that is that at least that area was taken care of. And that actually brings us to our first topic today. Yes, following the party. So for those of you who tuned in on Tuesday, I had really focused my prep time specifically on the next level of the Sunless Citadel. So I had expected them to descend down into the Twilight Grove sort of area, the Grove level of the Sunless Citadel, and do exploring there. And I put a ton of prep time into that. And then when we got there, Havana was insistent on going to explore the Rat Warrens, and to be fair, she had submitted to the whims of the rest of the party for 2 or 3 sessions, and they did sort of owe her. They had promised her that they would go back. I think there was the intent there at one point to go down to the next level and do some exploring and then kind of finish this thing on the way out. And we all knew that would never happen. It would never materialize. So she got to explore the area of the dungeon that she was keen on exploring, and that was fine and fun. But it brings me to the situation where sometimes, and this is not a unique experience at all. I think anyone who's DM'd even just a little bit has had that experience of, I've really prepped this particular area, and then they go that way. Okay. All right. Now, you have some options for that. I had read through that area, and I knew basically what the encounters were, right? I had looked at it before, so it was pretty fresh in my mind. Also, I knew that there was fairly self-contained, right? There was a rat encounter, there was this trap encounter, there was another rat encounter that had some treasure attached to it. It's something that I can easily brush up and go. So I did not feel the need to pull out a DM trick, which I would encourage you to use if this really catches you like by surprise, which is just go, hey, you know, time out. I just need 10 minutes to like look through my notes. I thought we're going to go in a different direction, but this is fine. Just give me 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Go get a soda, go to the restroom, whatever. Finish ordering the pizza, and we'll get right back into the game, right? So that's something that you can do to like if you haven't prepped that area, do a rundown. Write some bullet points down on an index card. Just 3 cool things that can happen in that place. What are the highlights that I need to get at? And if you have time, tackle the possible outcomes, right? So what's the coolest possible thing that could come as a result of this encounter? What's a partial success? You know, mixed failure, mixed success. And then where would an absolute failure of this encounter lead them? What information would they glean from an absolute encounter? That's your three-pronged attack. It's going to help you deal with whatever the dice and the players throw at you. So you can certainly feel free to, guys, referee, timeout. Sorry, I just need 15 minutes. We'll play. It'll be fine. But the only danger with saying that sort of thing is that then the players know, oh, he's not 100% on this. So then they start like metagaming and be like, is he making this up? Is it? That doesn't sound right. Is this supposed to be happening? So keep that in mind. That's the danger that you run. And in last night's case, I guess here's one of the key takeaways that I want you to think about in terms of following the party, which is so often as the DM, you are the driver of the plot. You are the controller of the pacing. You are the person who dispenses all of the clues, and therefore you really are at the rudder when it comes to steering the direction of the action and where the players are likely to go. And yes, they can surprise you, but so many times your job as both facilitator of the plot and the plot elements and where the story is unfolding, but also facilitator of the table experience. You're used to being in this position of authority and control where when you say, okay guys, listen up, everybody has to listen up, right? That's the way the game works. And that's the way that the story unfolds. But it can be very refreshing and a nice change of pace to sit back and follow the players. And that's a couple different things. Number one, follow them to where they want the story to go. We really want to check out these rat things, guys. Okay, well, I see in my notes here that there's nothing interesting that happens in this place. So I could just tell you that. We could skip over it. Or I can follow you and find out what interesting thing we can discover together there. So not only can I abdicate or accept their offer to take the reins and be surprised by what the players, where the players lead you and what you find there together. But also on a social level, it's nice to sometimes sit back and have those moments where the players banter back and forth and have in-character arguments or discussions or bits that they do, and you can just sit back and look at your notes, kind of think about what things are going to happen, what possibilities exist out there, what Schrodinger's clues have not been paid out, have not been interacted with and defined to their strict potential, and let the players play the game a little bit while you sort of just lay back and enjoy the fact that you're there with your friends and the pressure isn't on you to push the story forward, to rein in everyone's attention. Now, you can't totally check out on this situation because what you want to do is make sure that everybody who's doing this banter is having fun with the bit and they're engaged with the bit, or at least they're tolerating the bit. If they start looking antsy or frustrated or impatient, then it's your job to bring everybody back together, back into focus. Okay, all right, you've decided. It sounds like you've decided to go to the rat warrens, correct? Great. It can be as simple as reframing the discussion around that question and then prompting them into actually taking the action as opposed to talking around it. All right? But it goes back to kind of a core story gaming concept, which is follow the fun. Well, the players are the ones, there's 4 to 6 to 8 of them versus one of you. They have a lot more inspiration, and it takes a lot less effort when they all start working together to find something fun to follow than it does for you to just like be slinging things out there and see which one of them hooks, right? So be willing to have that session where, oh, well, I thought they were going this way. It doesn't pay to be mad or be grumpy about it, right? The, Here's the thing: unless that area is not getting used at all, like that's the case where your over preparation bites you. Is I've prepared no this whole different country for us to go explore, and they go, hey, we really want to do a pirate game. You've got all this whole campaign that you've wasted, right? So, uh, following the fun is something that takes a little bit of a fine ear. It requires you to be open, and it requires you to be willing to abandon effort that you have put in previously, plans that you have made. Now, I did not have any problem following the fun last night because I knew that the plans I had made and the effort that I put in was going to come back up next session. It's always fine relinquishing that responsibility. And in fact, it gives me another week to really sort of polish on those areas some more and do some fine tuning. I always tend to work right up until I've got to get in the car, so there's always a little bit of rush and a little bit of hustle. So now I have the opportunity to do an even better job of refining the areas that are coming up ahead and or integrating the areas that follow, right? So on Tuesday we broke the second level of the dungeon into sort of two pieces. We broke it into this goblin mutation area, and then we broke it down to the final boss fight area. Well, now I have the opportunity to do some more work on the final boss fight area and see if I can foreshadow or do a neat twist on that particular on that particular segue, right? So follow the party. Don't be afraid to follow the party. Know who's involved, who's not involved. Give yourself a break if you need to give yourself a break. But it was nice last session not to have to just continually be pumping out new information and continually sort of feeding them enough clues so that they could keep going on, and arrive at or make another realization and discover another thing that leads them to another piece of action that they should perform, etc., 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 right? They were a little self-motivated last night. Good. Great. Now I just have to sit back and respond. That's the best place to be. Because you know that you know what the possibilities are before you, and you can just spontaneously, freely, in the moment, respond based on sort of the menu of choices which you have laid as groundwork in front of you, right? And discover new ones in case you don't like any of the ones that you previously prepared. So, that's following the party. BSB Care, I'm going to get to your question. I'm going to put in the maybe in the Q&A, or maybe this will come up during Schrodinger's clues. Compressing encounters. So this is the other part of managing the session that helps keep that flow and that pacing going, right? Which is, if you go back and look at the encounters as written, when they go into the Fountain of Death area, the Rat Warrens section of the Sunless Citadel, it really is three distinct encounters, right? They walk into the area with the cells, and three giant rats attack. They go into the next area, there's the fountain and the trapdoors in the floor that they screw around with, and then assuming that they make enough noise, they either get attacked while they're screwing around with the fountain, or if they're stealthy about it, they go into the next room after they've done dinking around with the fountain, and they get attacked then, right? So it's 3 or 2.5 encounters the way you look at it. I really compressed that whole thing down into 2 encounters, because what I did not want to do last night was go through the hassle of rolling for initiative. And admittedly, like, it's a small table, but also there's the monsters, and there's Ronald P.P. Dusty Bones, the little skeleton sidekick, that takes up an initiative tick. So now we're rolling initiative for 6 different things, and we get everything all ordered up. and they kill the rats in relatively short order, and then we sweep all of that aside, and then they go in and they screw around with the fountain for a while, and then we roll for initiative again, right? It's just, I looked at that and I said, the mechanics of this, the pacing that's involved here is very much start, comes to an abrupt end, start something else, get interrupted, start something else, comes to an abrupt end, whack, whack, whack with a bunch of arrows, and then maybe finish off this fountain of death thing or whatever it is. Well, why have that sort of false start of we're going to investigate the fountain when I can just send Mama Rat and her minions in and have one 2 or 3 round combat encounter that it only involves one roll of initiative, and then it's all wrapped up and done, and then they can do their investigation after that, as opposed to having a combat that's over very abruptly, going into some more investigation, and then starting a whole nother combat, whole nother round of initiative, whole nother, like, you know, you're ripping players out of their framework for their play experience. Okay, well, let's take a look at this fountain. All right, well, you dig around, and then somebody shouts something, and then, oh, well, guess what? You hear a rustle come from the other room. Roll for initiative. Okay, let's go back and look at, you know, by the time that's all, it's not good pacing. So instead, I decided to compress those encounters. It was the same thing down in the Grove level downstairs, right? So if you look at that first room with the skeletons and the twig blights, which I've reskinned, obviously, you see that Balsag, the unfortunately named bugbear, is supposed to show up like in round 3 or 4. No. End of round 1, end of round 2, top of round 2, whatever it was. Like, get that guy in the fight. We're on the combat treadmill. Let's keep going. Let's chug this thing up to some drama. Havana's character gets flattened by his giant fist. And then some resolution. You slay him. Great. Okay, fine. So this encounter's compressed. Now, the danger of this is that at, 2 or 3 sessions ago, we had all of these goblin encounters compressed into one giant melee encounter. That was too much. It was too many participants in the encounter. That combat took way too long and was monolithic in terms of the space that it occupied in the play session. There was a little bit of RP and investigation at the top, and then just all fighting for the next 3 hours, right? So you have to be careful not to compress too much, and you have to be careful not to compress in a way that's not plausible. Why would he come to help them? Aren't they natural enemies or whatever? But I thought there was a successful use of combining some encounters to make one challenging encounter. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that my players, because of the nature of it being a streaming game and the way that we've integrated donations and stuff like that, players are a little overpowered for their level. They have higher than average hit points. They have some special abilities that get tripped off that aren't normally available to anyone in a normal D&D game, right? Largely I compensate by that by maxing out hit points on the monsters, and that so far seems to work fairly well. We'll see if that continues to scale. But throw a couple more, 3 giant rats just as a single encounter is not challenging, and therefore it's not fun. I think Amazon is going to drop something off. Just wait. Scan happened. I heard the beep. Whose door is it going to ring? Nobody's door. The drama. The drama. So that's just my little tip on compressing encounters. Find ways so that it's not minions fight, the combat stops, and then the boss appears. No, the boss responds. The boss makes a later entrance, etc. All right. And then finally, the last thing on our list today, and then we'll have some time for Q&A and sort of general discussion. Schrodinger's clues to the rescue. So for those of you who were watching last night, we came to a moment where they were investigating that well in the Goblin Chief's throne room, right? And in the adventure as written, there's not any other way to get down there other than climbing down the vines. Okay? Well, that didn't make any sense to the players. They did not, I don't think they trusted the vines to hold their weight, and that just didn't seem like a very plausible path for anyone to go up and down between these two levels. They just climb the vines. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, well, you know, I mean, there's a fantasy world, or there's a take on a fantasy world where you're like, yeah, of course they climb the vines. Why wouldn't they? Why bother putting in stairs? So there's two things that happened. Number one, Amy's character looked for. There's got to be some other way down there. She rolled. She got okay. I'm like, all right, well, they need some encouragement to go down this 80-foot shaft that seems rather dangerous, right? That Grayson almost plummeted to his doom down this 80-foot shaft. So I added another detail. Okay, well, it looks like there's some handholds and footholds that are carved in. It's just that, like, a lot of them have been covered over by the vines, so they weren't very obvious at first. Great. That was a nudge. They didn't get nudged on that. That was not convincing for them. Okay, fine. Well, let's look for a different way to get down this thing. Now, for those of you who have been following my advice about improv and things like that, I always talk about improv is about establishing patterns and fulfilling patterns. Well, what's the pattern that had been established previously in the dungeon that they had just acted upon? The pattern was you investigate a fountain, and there's some sort of draconic inscription on it that provides a key phrase, and when you speak that key phrase, a magical effect ensues. Whether that's a potion of fire breath, which is produced by the dragon shrine, or a cloud of poisonous gas, which just had been produced not but 20 minutes ago, earlier in the dungeon. So these are things where you say, oh, okay, this has now become sort of a recurring element, at least in this location, which is that the people who built this temple had magical effects inscribed on their wells or their shrines or whatever it was. So how could that apply to this particular case? This well seems like a fountain, or is in that realm of architectural structures that hold water. So it's not a huge leap. What can we do? Well, Schrodinger's clues to the rescue. I had that map with that Malathatazan word or whatever I wrote down on it, right? That was just out there, just lingering, just waiting to be used. They had no idea what it was for, and they'd forgotten about it. And I was planning to use it in a different area, but it was still just full of potential. It had not been defined in specific and concrete, like what is the meaning of this thing. So that's why I wrote it down on a sticky note, and you see this word. Oh, okay. Ah, you're right. Then that was a little bit tricky. There were some marginal ability checks, intelligence checks to remember where it was, but then ultimately you do the reveal of, yeah, it's the same word that was on this map that Gregory had. Gregory knew this word. He had found this word somewhere. He had written it down as being important. Well, guess what? We just, not only did we solve the problem of how are the players going to get down to the next level, which is honestly the most mundane problem that there is, but they wanted some other solution other than climb down. And ultimately, it's a low-stakes exercise, so why not provide them a little bit of the Tensor's floating disk or whatever, levitation platform, however you want to interpret what that thing was. Give them a fantasy, make the location more fantastic by giving them the opportunity to ride this magical elevator down. Oh, we had this clue that we figured out. We discovered the way to use this thing. It doesn't cost you as the DM anything. It's not like they're going to steal the levitating platform and take it someplace. No, it's clearly just tied to this specific place. So there's a mystical elevator that they can use, but they can't steal and they can't sell. Perfect. Great. Let them have it. So, not only is it a win-win in terms of the immediate challenge that has been posed to the characters, but it was also a huge win in terms of revealing more about the greater story. Gregory knew that this thing was there. Gregory planned to use this thing. Well, wait a minute. That implies that Gregory voluntarily went down into the lower level of the Sunless Citadel. Now, that had already been implied to some degree, but this definitely reinforces it in a way that I had not planned at all. Okay, the only planning I had done was, this is a map that was found in Gregory's area. I know he's involved in this somehow. I'm going to write this word on here that I determined later would mean reveal in Draconic. And then and it all just fell together. So I had the ability to take advantage of a Schrodinger's clue and an empty hook that was hanging out there that was just available to just boom, plug in, and it fulfilled two wonderful functions. One of them was related to how are they going to get downstairs. Very fanciful answer to a very mundane problem. But let's be honest, Dungeons and Dragons often involves fanciful answers to mundane problems. It's dark. I will cast a light spell. I will use my ever-burning flame. Light a torch. So that's the one part. And the other part is it revealed more about the story of what's going on. That's a huge win. Enormous. It reinforced what the players suspected. So that is why I'm such a big fan of having things out there that are a little ambiguous, that have hints about what they might be for, or what they might be connected to, but are available so that when you have that moment of like, oh, I know exactly where I'm going to drop this in, or you plug it in, and the players feel like, oh, it was this genius, seamless experience. I wish I had planned that far ahead. I will tell you, efforts to plan that far ahead are often fruitless. I hate it when you come to a module and it says they need, the room description will be like Area 64. If they don't have the key from Room 7, they won't be able to open this door. You're telling me that there's 50, 47, 57, whatever rooms between here and there that they have to explore or go back to in order to open this door? No! Nobody at the table plays long ball on a conscious level, in my experience. Your players don't remember stuff more than 2 sessions out. That, if you go back and look, more than 2 sessions ago, a lot of stuff gets forgotten. There are a few highlights. I feel like the Goblin Log is going to stick longer than 2 sessions, but generally 2 sessions back, 3 sessions back, is the extent of your player's recall. And anything prior to that, it might occur to them, but do not count on that as like, oh yeah, guys, we have that magical wand that creates a huge like tentacle type of thing. Wouldn't the drow be interested? Wouldn't that also be drow technology or whatever? No, they may not get to that thing, right? So, and yet they feel, even though I had to remind them of it and do a reveal of it, they like it drove a point home for them. And I didn't feel like it was a super dickish way. It can be a little dickish sometimes to be like, aha, you guys forgot about this. And I will admit, like, I was anxious to get that map on the table. So I gave them a lot of leeway in their checks, and their intelligence checks and whatnot. I mean, ultimately, I probably shouldn't have had them even roll. Just go, you remember it came from this. But what the heck? All right. James V, welcome. To go back to BSB Care's point, it says, BSB Care says, speaking of Schrodinger's clues, I was thinking about this earlier today. I know that hooks are a time-worn phrase, but I really appreciated how it took on a more fishing metaphor last night when you dangled out some of the dormant plots or Schrodinger's clue and drew back when they didn't really bite. For example, the different bones of the skeletons, and gave them some real when they did. The skeleton with the ranger armor. Yeah, so some of that is DM finesse in terms of, or let's put it this way, is intentional finesse. Like, We know from our plot radar that we're getting towards this thing where bone gets turned into jade, and that those little jade statuettes of dragons that she has, those are actually made of bone. It's somehow some sort of weird petrified, calcified bone, right? But I want that to be revealed down the road for the Gulthias tree. So knowing on my plot radar where that thing lives, I'm going to give her a hint about it. But unless they explicitly look further into it and really ask some very detailed probing questions, I'm not going to give them a whole lot of information because I don't want to get ahead of where my reveals are too much, right? I want that to kind of be making sense. I want to have the opportunity to reinforce that, and then I want to have the opportunity for that to just like fully like blossom into its defined potential when for sure when we get to the Gulthias tree, right? So that was a case of I'm not going to give you a lot of detail and extra information about what's happening here. Number one, because you're not asking, but number two, I'm not going to volunteer it because I want to save some of those opportunities for later on in the session, for down the road, just a little bit, not far, but I don't want to play my whole hand right here. I don't need tack to realize, well, these things are really bone. Now this starts to get creepy and weird. We're working our way up towards that. And admittedly, it's like a slow slog. It could be going a little bit faster. But I think next session we'll have opportunities to put even more chum in the water in that respect around that particular theme, right? Conversely, we've talked for several weeks now about how Thawne's character is not really connected to the rest of the party in the same way that the other three characters are, right? Or he doesn't have the same set of driving motivations, or let's just call them like flourishes of character development that some of the other PCs do. And not as like a rip, but just like his character feels isolated compared to the rest of the other characters. Obviously, Avril and Grayson have this brother, not sister type of dynamic going on, and Tack has this relationship with everybody who's like, she's like, I'm working through some stuff, help me out, or don't help me out, as the case may be, and Grayson has this big brother kind of, I'm protecting everyone, I'm the stoic butt of everyone's joke, and Thawne is just, I murder stuff, right? In terms of the in terms of the Ranger, I that was a snap call. That was again where inspiration struck in terms of I looked at the treasure that was supposed to be in there, and it was supposed to be a, a member of the party that they were supposed to be looking for. Well, there was no third member of the party that they were supposed to be looking for. And therefore, I hit upon, I just had a flash on this guy's a ranger. Oh, you know what? Let's make him part of the city militia or the Oakhurst militia. Let's make him part of the patrol. And he went missing. And then let's fill in a little more detail and give even more explication here, exposition. Let's explicate it further and give some more exposition in terms of, oh, you recognize this guy. He went missing. They put out a search for him. They couldn't find him. He was part of the city, Oakhurst militia, and your dad didn't like him. He thought he was a little dodgy, but he wasn't in charge. He's not the sheriff. He's not the mayor. He thought this guy was getting away with stuff, and he wasn't real sad when he went missing. He figured he was probably up to no good. Okay, well that now all of a sudden, that brings Thawne back into here's events that are transpiring at the Sunless Citadel, and they connect to your dad, what's going on back in town, the mayor and the sheriff, etc., etc. That I thought was a fairly important new development that popped up on our plot radar. And that was a spark that I got just purely off of it said the character was a ranger. Okay, well now I've got if he's wearing the official armor, he's got the official ring, and da 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 da. Like, okay, now it connects to something interesting that the players can relate to, and specifically that Gaurav and his character can relate to. As opposed to being, oh, it's some random party member that you're supposed to rescue. Who gives a crap, right? So that's the deal there. That's the deal there. All right. I believe let's do a little Q&A. That kind of covers Schrodinger's clues. And we got 15 minutes left, so I'll take some questions about whatever you like. Whatever you like. Thomas W.D. Young asks a good question here, which is, do you think you would have done the rats differently if they'd encountered them at first level? Absolutely. I likely would have done them differently. And partly, I think, because they would have been still more in that sort of like exploration mode, and they probably would have been through several encounters already. So part of it is, what level are they? How fresh are they on the day? And then what else is around them, right? So you really have to look at your pacing and encounter balance as, if this is the first encounter of the day and they have all of their resources available to them and there's no one else to provide pressure or a threat, then you can go harder on the party. Why not go a little harder on the party, unless it's going to burn a bunch of time that you don't want to burn? But this didn't add significantly extra time. It did burn resources. It did provide a challenge. You'll notice that they took a short rest immediately after they got poisoned. And it paid off that way. If they had been first level and sort of like been through the first fire shrine, and then they went into the other dark sealed tomb with the sarcophagi, and they've been pretty beat up, and then they come into the next area, would I have had them fight just 3 rats? Maybe. Certainly would have looked at that as an option. So it's one of those things where encounter design is just one. It's an art, not a science. I don't care how many times people tell you, like, here's the encounter builder matrix, and here's how you do the math, and da da da. Like, those things are guidelines. They are not strict and defined tools. I think there was a fundamental premise behind 3E, was that you could math your way through anything. You use the math. This is the optimal encounter for this level. And while that was a driving design premise, which informed the rest of the game, in practice, I don't know that it played out with the same level of precision as what was intended behind the design, right? So you have to be aware of, where are they at right now? Like, is this, are the first encounter of the day, 15th encounter, or whatever? Like, you know, like how are they doing hit point wise at the start of this encounter? How many resources have they burned toward now? And then how much do you think they're going to explore around? What's lurking in the neighborhood? Because I don't want to throw a challenging encounter at them if 2 rooms away is the boss fight. Not necessarily. Not if it's their 3rd or 4th encounter of the day and they're really, like, maxed out. Okay, well, maybe I won't compress that encounter quite as hard. But it's one of the ways that you can regulate the challenge presented to the players. And ultimately, that's one of your jobs, right? Is to present a challenge to the players. They overcome it through tactical play and improvisational brilliance, and then they were rewarded accordingly. So one of the ways that you can turn the dials on that is to bring things together, spread them apart, give them time to rest, recover, deny them time to rest and recover. It's pretty heady stuff today, you guys. We're really getting into the meat and bones here of of some DMing, my DMing philosophy. Beast Be Care says, speaking of the Goblin Log, because of Amy's reaction to Wugget's entry in the log, will we be finding Wugget as perhaps a mini-boss alongside Belloc? I I honestly don't know. Like, that was an amazing moment, and I got caught up in it too, just like how hard she laughed about that. And that was a lot of fun. I think there is the potential for Wugget to make an appearance, but I think he needs to make an appearance in some sort of sympathetic light and not as a mini boss. I don't know. I can see it being played out as a mini boss. Um, I could see it being played out as a mini boss, and that would be fun to like to turn the to turn tables and like, oh yeah, screw Wugget, like let's get him. I think the goblins have been presented as sort of this the sad, unwitting victims of Belloc and his nefarious concoctions and experimentations. So I think it would be better for the party to have the opportunity to save Wugget and find out that he is just sort of the weakling of the bunch who's always like kicked around and got bullied, and they have this opportunity to rescue him from his ultimately dire fate, whatever that might be, at the hands of Belloc. Uh, in the prep that I did last night, I explicitly did not carve out a place for Wugget to be encountered, which now I'm sort of grateful. Well, now I'm grateful they didn't go that far because given her reaction, I think I would have had to spin something new on the spot. So I have some time to think about it. But I would encourage you to consider when you have those moments where they really hook into an NPC, you can go like, oh, okay, well, this guy's going to turn out to be the evil twin or the vicious lieutenant or whatever who gets offed before the big bad guy does. Um, that that tends to be more rewarding when that character has been a thorn in the party's side, right? When that NPC has been leaving traps or stealing from the party or you know threatening people they know, or they just keep popping up as like, oh yeah, that's that guy who he rented that boat out from under us, and then we had to go rent a passage on another ship that was twice as much. I hate that guy, right? And my interpretation of the way that Amy responded to the inclusion of Wugget in the Goblin Log, which there it is, you guys. There's the Goblin Trade Log, which I thought she was just like tickled that like this poor goblin got screwed over by the chief. And I think it would be fun to like if they were to encounter him, have the party have the opportunity to save him and then have him be kind of this like maybe be this I don't know, not a brown nosing character, but like sort of like a Joe Pesci kind of like nasally toned whiner kind of guy. Sorry. So I think there's an opportunity to take that character and go someplace fun with him or her, whatever it is. It certainly then here's why this is important, right? Whenever you have the opportunity to introduce an element of whimsy that the players are invested in, don't ignore it. Pay special attention to those whimsical elements that players are genuinely intrigued or entertained by. Because I can tell you from personal experience, there is nothing worse than fabricating whimsical elements that you think are fun and funny and fall flat when the party actually encounters them. So when you have an unexpected element of whimsy that the players really, really bite off on, revisit that, give that consideration, think about ways that you can take your otherwise. I mean, if we look at the rest of the adventure, right? It's pretty grim stuff. The goblin or Belloc is capturing humanoids, goblins, kobolds, party members, etc., torturing and experimenting upon them. I mean, there's ways to tone down the harshness of that situation. But that's pretty grim stuff. And then we go further and find out that there's this Golthius tree that is, you know, this spun from the heart of a vampire, etc., etc., etc. Like, that's also, like, pretty gruesome, grisly stuff. So if we have an element of whimsy where there's a moment that they can free Wugget, and Wugget is,
hey, you guys are the best. Really love you guys. What can I do? And thank you guys. You're amazing.
okay, like, don't be afraid to, like, be able to interject a quick change in tone, a light element that 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 counterbalances some of the grimdark elements that you otherwise have arrayed before you. All right, let's take a look and see what other questions that we have. Yeah, the Death Fountain was super fun. They got poisoned by it, and yet they all like they. It was the great thing about that was it was not unexpected, right? They got poisoned by it. They got exactly what they thought was going to happen. So it was honestly one of those things where Havana lobbied so hard for let's go to the Fountain of Death, and the other players were like, why are we going to this thing called the Fountain of Death? And then they fought their way in there and made this grand entrance and figured out what the key phrase was, and they're all ready to capture the magical juice that's going to pour forth, and then death comes out. Of course, why didn't I know? You know, there's nothing players love better than being able to say, I told you so. So, BSB Care makes a good point. Wugget could make an appearance in Forge of Fury. That could be interesting or fun. Yeah, maybe like a long-term kind of guy, and an ongoing character. He could potentially become I don't know why it's a he, but it seems better. I don't know, for whatever reason, it seems better as a he. I'll have to think about that. But yeah, to have him be, I don't think we're quite at the level of everybody loves this guy so much he should be a recurring character. I think we had the possibility for that for Meepo if Meepo had come back to escort the party instead of Eustrail, right? Like, we could have reinforced the character of Meepo, and they could have definitely forged an alliance there, and it would have been a long-term relationship that could have borne fruit in a number of different ways. Right now, Wugget's on their radar, and if we want him to become an ongoing element, then we should include him immediately in the next session. We should really be doing a little bit of plot radar here, but you'll all remind me on Tuesday, won't you? Yeah. All right. Da-da-da. Gregory and Dell were secretly friends with Wugget, and they're on a mission to rescue him. That would be hilarious. That's funny. All right. Mm-hmm. Do. Yeah, you can't shift tones super hard, right? But that's always true whenever you introduce an NPC, is how you portray them, the situation that they appear in, right? And the way that they respond and the characterization that you make. Those are all factors in terms of how seriously your party is going to take an NPC. Are they presented in a sympathetic fashion? Are they presented in an antagonistic fashion? Are they presented in sort of a harmlessly humiliating type of fashion? Which, to me, that's where humor, that's where people are likely to not take somebody seriously. Like the kobold who apparently has the kobold who keeps slipping and falling down, or something like that. The kobold who is so greedy that he knocked the bookshelf over on top of himself, and he's pinned underneath the weight of all of these books, and he was trying to get something off the top shelf or whatever, right? That is a humiliating situation. It is relatively harmless. He's not presenting a threat, but is also not particularly sympathetic. He's greedy. So that's where people will tend to like kind of screw with those characters, right? Ultimately, it comes down to how much empathy do your players have for that character, and at at the zero end of empathy is when they come in as antagonists and they drop, they're brandishing weapons and they're attacking you. And then the mid ground is where they're sort of these like whimsical kind of characters. Well, I don't want to call it whimsical. I want to say like they're in this situation where they're harmless. They're presented as being innocuous things, but not particularly appealing. And then maximum potential for empathy is when they're portrayed as I'm just coming up with this off the top of my head, so don't let me think about it too hard, but or don't take it as like my end all be all judgment pronouncement upon this issue. But if you present them as sympathetic victims, that's where your maximum empathy has the potential for coming in, right? And that's where we saw the goblins swing that spectrum from these vicious mutated creatures who are pouring through the hallway and viciously attacking all these kobolds and nearly killed Eustrail. Two, we go through the door and find out that the rest of them are all drug addicts who are in the midst of fever sweats and can barely, hold the glass to their own lips. So think about that. That you can also introduce them in different situations and actually turn the player's sympathy around, right? To some degree. Yeah, I mean, it depends upon the setting, but really it depends upon the setting to establish a baseline. But also it depends upon the presentation, because if you look at the setting, the Cult of the Dragon is genuinely evil. They have nefarious ends. They are allied with Tiamat. And kobolds are their servitors in the setting. So as written, the kobolds should not be that sympathetic. The party should be just as interested in wiping them out as they should be interested in wiping out the goblins. But you know what? That's not the way it's played out. The party has become trusted allies, and if not friends, with both Meepo and Eustrail. And some of that is by necessity, and that like Amy couldn't make it, and so we had to forge it. But some of it is by the way that it's presented. Meepo, when you walk in on him, as written, laying on his bed, face down, heaving in tears, distraught that his dragon has been stolen from him, that he has now become nearly an outcast. He's labeled as a failure within his own clan. Tremendously sympathetic character. In the setting as written, there's no reason why the paladin should be like, oh, you're a kobold? Dick. So keep that in mind. What else do we got? The problem I see with Wugget as an NPC is he's a goblin and they're going to want to kill him except Grayson. I don't know. I think Amy will make an exception when she finds out that this is Wugget. Oh, here's the thing. The best part about this is they will either immediately kill Wugget, in which case, fine, that quick, it's over, done, resolution. Or they will sort of adopt Wugget as some sort of mascot or friend or whatever. It's like kind of the other extreme of that outcome. And then great, all right, fine. Then now they've made friends with, they've humanized the goblins, so to speak, right? And the mixed success and failure outcome there is that they will be entertained briefly by Wugget, but ultimately he becomes annoying, and then they decide to kill him. And that, to me, is probably the most tragic outcome. Yeah. All right. I'm not going to get into Judge Dredd versus Demolition Man. All right. So it is a little bit after 1. I think we don't have any other... We don't have any other outstanding questions. So let's see if the calendar actually got refreshed here, everyone. Yeah. So this is correct. Tonight at 8 o'clock, there will be another installment of Mr. David Crennan's Never Tell Me the Odds, Star Wars Edge of the Empire game, so that's pretty fun. Friday night is the season premiere. We're kicking off an all-new season of Call of Cthulhu Black Bag. Mr. Wes Otis is back in the driver's seat. So definitely check that out. So it's a whole new season. I can't remember if it's a different cast or not. I don't always track those sorts of those details. Ugh. I'm a bad saving thrower, you guys. Speaking of ways that you can be a good saving thrower, this Saturday at 2 o'clock at the Barnes & Nobles in Burbank, I will be doing an appearance with Mr. Scott Wardard, who has recently published a book with Green Ronin called Cinema and Sorcery. And they will be doing a little chat, and I will be apparently running some encounters. I haven't exactly pinned down exactly what I'm going to do with that, but I think I'll be taking sort of my stripped down starter D&D approach. I have an extremely like simplified version of D&D that I run for beginners, and I think I'll take that along, and we'll play through some short encounters with people in the crowd and whatnot. And so I think that will be fun. Try and find a way to tie it into some of the cinema and sorcery stuff. So whether that's maybe we have adversaries from the Beastmaster show up, or somebody wields the Krull glaive, or what have you. Really, what it is, it gives me an excuse to watch the Beastmaster and watch Krull again. So that's always good. So I don't know if I will be going to Free RPG Day. We have some other saving throw things going on this weekend. We will be busy, so we're sort of on a hiatus this weekend, other than that appearance. But we will be back on Monday. I believe RPGS. Oh boy, what did Eric say? He's going to be out of town. He was going to play in Mac Beauvais' game, and I can't remember what she's running. She's gonna have RPG Exploration Society. She's at the helm on Monday night. So tune in for that. That'll be exciting. On Tuesday, I'm back here with Disorganized Play. We're going to talk more about what's popped up on our plot radar. We talked about a couple things. I think they're exciting developments, and we're also going to like go a little bit harder into our theme. They only got really dealt with 2 rooms, so it gives me an opportunity to prepare and also refine, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to do that. Yes, DJ Regular is 100% right. Teenagers from Outer Space. Yes. So that's cool. I encourage you to follow me. I mean, if you're on Twitter, Twitter is all about Origins this weekend. On the one hand, I sort of regret that I'm not there. On the other hand, if I had gone to Origins, we would have missed last night's game, for one. We would have missed this, for another. But more importantly, for my job, I would have missed a callback and an audition, and we'll see what happens, on Friday or Monday in terms of work that pops up. So it has been a slow start to the year on the Hollywood front, in general, from what I'm understanding from both fellow actors and casting directors and agents and whatnot. But now we're getting close. I hate to tell you, even though it's the middle of June, football season is underway here in commercial Hollywood land. We are starting to make those fun things that you're going to see in August, September. So I'm very envious of everybody who's at Origins. I'm watching with a keen eye to see what's going on. It looks like there's a lot of fun Tomb of Annihilation stuff on the D&D front. For those of you who follow the goings on over at Evil Hat, they just released at the show. It was the public street date for the Dresden Files co-op card game, as well as for the Dresden Files accelerated version of the RPG. So there's an original Dresden Files RPG that they published that uses the Fate system in a particular way, but this is the sort of the sleek, new, streamlined form, Dresden Files Accelerated, and also caught up with all the books. So there's a lot of great buzz about that. Only other thing I want to mention is there are 2 more episodes left of Dungeons & Dragons: The Improvised Campaign on Wednesdays. I believe, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag a little bit here, I believe Emily will be playing her new Barbarian Warrior for both of the, certainly one, if not both of those sessions. We've been having a lot of fun over on GNS with that, and it will be a little disheartening to have to go on hiatus with that show, but the indications are it'll come back in the fall. I've had fun doing that, but if you have a chance to tune in or catch the VODs, definitely go back and watch the past 2 sessions. Those have been a lot of fun. And then finally, the big push, of course, for us on Saving Throw Show, not this coming Friday, but a week from Friday, is the Alzheimer's Association Longest Day. We'll be doing our standard 24-hour marathon of gaming to raise money for the Alzheimer's Association and to help them combat this terrible disease, which has affected people in my life and Megan Caves and other people who are involved in Saving Throw Show. It's just personally very meaningful for me, but it's also a great charity that is helping to fight a very... I really find it a very debilitating disease because of the things that it does to the victim's personality, right? You lose the person, you watch the person mentally die before they physically die. And it's a excruciating experience to go through, whether you're the victim of it or it's someone that you love who's involved. So get your donations at the ready. We have prizes to give away. My understanding is that we're going to have some goodies from Evil Hat because Mr. Brian Patterson from D20 Monkey fame is going to be here running a game of Carthoon for us on Saturday afternoon, the 24th, from 1 to 5. And he will be playing in my Marvel Superheroes game, which is titled Unlikely Heroes. A bunch of tourists are kicking about on the Vegas Strip on a Saturday night when the little green men from Mars visit our planet, and their weird mutation death rays and alien technology start awakening new mutations and powers within our unsuspecting civilians. I'm going to be using the original Marvel Superheroes phase rip system, and I'm going to be rolling powers either directly out of or in a more compact table of offerings from the Ultimate Powers book, which is completely random for everything from, like, Sue Storm level force fields that protect you from attacks by Galactus to weird, you grow gills, that sort of stuff. So that's that. The bearded men thing, I can't give you a great. I can't give you a direct link other than to go to twitch.tv/geekandsundry is the link. That's the channel where Critical Role is housed at Whatnot. I can't give you a link to the VODs because you can only get to those if you are an actual subscriber to their channel. So that does not find their way onto YouTube very often. That's been their approach. That's fine. I get it. So that's something I'm super excited about. I'm super pumped to have Brian here next weekend, and I'm super pumped to not only run that game but also to play in his game. We're trying to line up some other guests. We don't have everything else strictly nailed down. More details will emerge hopefully after Origins here, so in the coming week. But stay tuned to Saving Throw, and thank you so much to Farquaad for modding. Thank you to everyone, all of our regulars who joined us, as well as all of our new people who joined us. I really appreciate your time and attention and your willingness to listen to my ideas. It always helps me formulate and, I don't want to say fossilize, but really refine my ideas by talking to you. That makes me a better game master, and that means I run better games. So thank you so much for your time and attention, and until next time, let's dungeon! 115 in a row!